Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. It's Coram and Ed Carson here with a breakdown of the action in today's session, where we saw stocks get a little bit of a bounce today, but there was one group that definitely stood out.
Yeah, this was there's not much of a balance, but we did get one. There was one group, as you say, like oil services stocks doing pretty well. Schlumberger, Halliburton, and a recent IPO, ProFrac.
We'll take a look at those stocks, but first, let's check in on those major indexes. So today, small caps outperforming with the Russell finishing up almost 0.7% here. We also had the Dow up 0.3% today. The S&P up just 0.1%, and the Nasdaq essentially flat, up a measly 1 point today, Ed. So where does that leave us? I mean, if we're at these oversold levels, why aren't we seeing more of a bounce?
Yeah, I mean it's nice to end the losing streak, I guess, but it was like you would expect more of a bounce, some kind of effort after several days, maybe a move toward the 50-day line that which might or might not work or might get resistance, but it doesn't really change a whole lot. I mean, the trend hasn't changed. We're down quite a bit over the past week. The major indexes, I mean, the S&P and the Nasdaq are below their 50-day line. So is the Russell 2000. The only one that can show any kind of technical action that's sort of notable would be the Dow, because that did find support at the 50-day line. I mean, it's not bouncing much, but that was nice to see. Some leading stocks like the major indexes, some of them found support at the 21-day line or the 50-day line, but that really is only going to last as long as the market does. I mean, for the most part, I mean, maybe the stocks we're going to look at are a little different because they're tied to oil prices and such, but for the most part, you need to see a lot more. This has not really changed the sort of generally negative vibe we've had over the past week or 2 weeks.
Exactly. And I also haven't shown the NASDAQ yet, so we can just briefly show that. You can see the just ever so slight upside reversal here today, but not all too far from its lows from early November. So on the downside, we're definitely keeping tabs on that level. On the upside, these converging moving averages. Let's check in on the 10-year Treasury yield, seeing a pretty decent pop here today and a pretty clear break of a trend line here, maybe not from that ultimate peak, but a lot of the action in this downward channel here.
Yeah, it's not entirely negative for stocks. Some of this was related to the Bank of Japan being a little more hawkish and basically letting its bond yield go all the way up to 0.5%, which would just seem crazy for us, but that's pretty high. Shorter term yields did not rise very much, and that's more closely aligned with the Fed. So you could almost argue this may not have hit the stocks very much today, and stocks did come off their lows, obviously.
Let's also take a look at UUP, the dollar here. So moving in the opposite direction today and undercutting its recent lows, now back down to its lowest levels since the summer, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, the dollar really fell versus the yen, so that was a lot of what happened here. It's weird to see the dollar tumble like this as bond yields are soaring. So,
right.
I mean, markets are not doing what they were doing a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago.
Yep.
Yeah, that was an interesting move there.
Okay, and now let's take a look at the energy sector and oil services. So here's XLE up 1.6% today, the heaviest weightings in your Chevron and your Exxon, trying to find a bit of a floor of support. And we have OIH. This is specifically the field services group. So look at that, up 3.6% today to retake the 50-day.
Yeah, and there's a couple of stocks that are going to look an awful lot like that because it's got some big holdings in there, and some of those, like Schlumberger. Yeah, I mean, I think people are betting maybe that prices will be higher the next year. Certainly, there'll be a lot of demand for oil services, oil machinery. So even though oil prices are near 1-year lows, that there's a hope that will be brighter days ahead for at least the oil services sector.
Okay, well, let's dig a little deeper into this group with a look at Schlumberger first, SLB. So pretty similar to the last chart that we showed, but a bit stronger with a gain of 4% today. Looks like we did have lighter volume on this move to the upside, but SLB finding support where you'd expect, right at the top of its prior base, that round number at 50, and arguably actionable here today with this bounce.
Yeah, bouncing off of there, bouncing still in range of what is technically still a valid buy point, I suppose. But so you could have done that, and at the end of this week there will be should be a new base, assuming it doesn't surge higher or fall lower. So there is that. Yeah, so you could have done that. I mean, one of the difficult things is the market's not looking great, but this would seem like around the time you'd want to do it, because all of these names, like just as with everywhere else, some of these names they'll make runs and then they'll roll over. So you want to catch them early. So
Right.
it makes it really difficult. If you do anything and buying any of these stocks, you should be doing it with nibbles, small buys, and thinking about taking profits along the way pretty quickly to avoid losing trades.
Absolutely, and getting in on those early entries, like you said, now would be the time because you have a line in the sand to know where to get out. That isn't so far away that you are waiting for this shakeout to happen, and it's a normal shakeout, but you've round tripped a pretty big gain. So things that you could get away with in a bull market, like buying extended stocks. Now we're starting to sound like broken records here, Ed.
Yeah.
When's this going to end, right? But yeah, waiting to buy that strength often is the very moment where you do see that rotation starting to happen. So something to keep in mind there. Also, let's take a look at Halliburton in the group HAL, bouncing after tightening up here for a couple of days around some moving averages. This is still in the handle of a base here.
Yeah, that handle will be long enough to be its own base at the end of this week. Don't really see an early entry of any real note at this point. I mean, you could do it here. It's sort of moving from the 50-day line. It just feels a little more awkward than SLB or even OIH. But it's nice to see this working. It seems like are holding support. Something else was with SLB, the earnings are looking strong. See, some of the oil names, not so much, but there's a sense that maybe that they tapped wells. I mean, I wouldn't need to dig into it more, but you could imagine maybe they didn't do a lot of capital spending, some of these companies, and now just to keep production going and such, they're going to need to start drilling again, and that's why some of these names are picking up.
Yeah, so another good point there to look at those numbers behind the move as well. And let's see the depth of the base here. So the depth, although it is 47% and over 40% is a little bit of a warning sign. Like you said, this is essentially now its own new base structure here. So that can give us some solace there. Let's also take a look at ACDC getting back above its 10-week line after a pretty sharp break of that level a couple weeks ago, albeit in light volume when it did that. So far this week, also some light volume, but this is a pretty compelling bounce here off of some key levels, Ed.
Yeah, it's a little bit like SLB, but just more violent, which makes sense. It's smaller. It's an IPO. Breaking doing all those things, though it's getting extended from an old buy point, which maybe technically isn't valid, but all those things suggest there. The growth is really strong on this company. And so, yeah, and the volume was light, but not that light. Yeah. So, and you look, it's had 3 breakouts that haven't really worked that well. They move for a day or two or a week or two, and then they sort of roll over, which again, with this market, with an IPO, not shocking really. So this is definitely an intriguing name, but again, I wouldn't be piling in all your money into these 3 stocks and saying here we go, because but it would seem like around these levels would be where you would want to be getting into things like ProFrac or Schlumberger.
Right. Yeah. Get in early, go small, and don't overstay your welcome. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy.
All right. Well, Ed, it is interesting here. I guess just maybe one final thought from you on this group, because they're, if this is the standout group within the energy sector, how long can it continue to show that strength if we're seeing the broader sector starting to show some potential warning signs of topping? It seems like at the very least, investors maybe don't need to worry about that. Just focus first. Can you get a small profit? And then try to worry about holding on for a bigger move. It seems like the opportunities to hold on for a big move have been pretty few and far between in 2022.
Yeah, I think I was going to agree with you, but then I decided to agree with you. I think that you do want to. I mean, look, for the broader picture, yeah, I think there is a concern. You would probably want oil prices to go up at least some, like get that back up a little bit. It doesn't have to be this stratospheric at the highs, but some sense that basically, honestly, you want those oil producers to feel like it's worthwhile to spend money on oil services firms to produce more. So you want to have some kind of level. On the other hand, yeah, technically this is showing some strong action. They have some strong fundamentals. And so maybe you think more about, hey, let's just do the short term and play it that way. And worry about later. If it really takes off, then start thinking, well, do I really want to hold this for a long time or get out? And then you're going to maybe take a look at some of those bigger questions.
Yeah, but first things first, is it even worth trying to make a buck or two in these? But yeah, think quick, and it's a great reminder for myself as well. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back with more tomorrow morning on IBD Live, so please join us, investors.com/IBD Live for all the details. We will see you there, and we'll also see you right back here tomorrow at the close.